My banker colleagues and the CEO left me out in a 7-person meeting. No room for people from single-parent families. I walked out and reported it to my mom. Her response? Close my $10 billion account. Fatherless lady, you are unnecessary in meetings. What does my family background matter? Have you not heard me? Old lady, are your ears getting bad? Trust is crucial in our field. Is someone from a single mother household someone you can truly trust? What a ridiculous argument from Steve, the younger worker. Although he had previously made crude comments, he had now descended to the point of disparaging my family's circumstances, which were completely out of my control. How pitiful must Steve's life be for him to feel the need to degrade people in this way, to insult someone this much? Is that correct? I'm going to leave now though. I felt like I was walking out of the room with confidence, but as soon as I was by myself, I started crying. I never imagined being chastised for coming from a single mother home at this age. Despite my best efforts, I am confronted with an unalterable reality that threatens to shatter me. I always think of that person in times like this. I have a great ally who has added color to my life. Even though my mother and I have lived alone together up until this point, that person's presence is the reason I've been able to overcome so many obstacles. I hurried to my mother's side, believing that I am a 43-year-old bank employee named Jessica Wilson. Emma, my 70-year-old mother, lives with me. I threw myself into my work without any interruptions, and before I knew it, I had grown to this age. I consider the time I spend interacting with customers at the counter to be the most significant aspect of my work. My mother and I have faced many difficulties in our life together. I owe her everything because she raised me by herself starting when I was 10 years old. I can't even begin to picture the hardships she must have faced. I have no doubt that Mom made innumerable sacrifices that I was unaware of. I could never ignore her because of this. The foundation of my existence is my relationship with my mother. In my early recollections, we appeared to have everything we needed and had a luxurious lifestyle. Our house was so huge that guests frequently got lost inside, and it included a detached wing and a sizable garden. We even had employees to take care of whatever requests we made. I used to think that if I wanted something, I could have it. However, my life took a sharp shift at the age of 10, making it seem as though everything had fallen apart. My parents unexpectedly entered my room as I was playing with my dolls. My mother was on the verge of tears while my father's brows were pinched in rage. What's wrong? Jessica, listen carefully. Starting today, we have to leave this house. What do you mean? This house is no longer ours. From now on, we'll be living somewhere else. Questions swirled in my head, but my mother silently began packing my belongings into a bag. It seemed the talk of leaving the house was true. I've packed your clothes. Now, choose which toys you want to bring. Can't I bring them all? That might be tough. Just pick the ones that are most important to you. Having been accustomed to a life of luxury, I couldn't quite imagine what it would mean to move into a small room. Behind my mother, I could see my father moving restlessly, urging us to hurry. I grabbed the doll I was holding and decided to take it with me. It was modeled after a little girl from another country. I slipped the doll's clothes and accessories into the remaining spaces of the bag. Are you ready? Let's go then. And so we left the house. I didn't understand what was happening and kept glancing around nervously. As we walked down the long hallway, I could hear the voices of the house staff coming from one of the rooms. Apparently, my father had found a younger woman he wanted to remarry, so my mother was no longer needed. Their tone was one of irresponsible excitement as though they were enjoying the gossip about our family. My father didn't show any hint of concern. Looking back, he probably didn't want to deal with demands for alimony or any other complications. Being an old-fashioned man, he had likely used his authority as a husband to divorce my mother. My mother, being a strong-willed person, didn't cry or complain. She quietly understood my father's intentions and agreed to the divorce. When we left the house, none of the staff who would normally see us off came out to bid us farewell. There was no car waiting for us either, so the two of us began walking down the road. The shiny leather shoes I wore, adorned with decorations, quickly became scuffed, and my toes started to ache. I had never walked this much before in my life. Even so, my mother didn't stop. She clenched her teeth, kept her gaze forward, and just kept walking. I couldn't help but realize that something had drastically changed. My mother walked straight to a real estate office and chose an apartment that could be rented immediately. What's an apartment? It's where we're going to live from now on. When we arrived in front of the building, I couldn't understand how this place could be someone's home. To describe it in words I understood back then, it looked like a storage shed. It was old with an overall dull and faded appearance. The pillars and walls seemed ancient, and I couldn't help but worry if it could really keep out the wind and rain. The inside of the apartment was just as bad, dusty, and unwelcoming. At first, I was reluctant to even go inside. Are we really going to live here? I liked our old house better. You'll get used to it soon. It's only for a little while, my mother replied, her face tense. For someone like her, who had lived as a lady of the house with servants in a spacious mansion, moving into such an old apartment must have been a humiliation. She never voiced her dissatisfaction like I did, but I'm sure she wasn't at peace inside. Up until then, my mother hadn't worked, and we had very little savings. The small amount of property my father had given us barely covered the deposit for the apartment and some basic necessities before it ran out. The concept of not having money was a completely new experience for me. Whenever I heard the phrase, "I don't have money," in conversations or on TV before, I always thought it was some kind of joke. Most of the time, it wasn't serious. It was just a casual remark. But now, it was different. When I asked for snacks or toys like I used to, my mother would look sad and say, "Maybe next time." I quickly learned that next time didn't come very often. I also transferred from my private school to a public one. The atmosphere was completely different, and at first, I was confused. But over time, I began to see the advantages. There were other kids who were just as poor as we were, and I no longer felt pressure to spend money just to fit in. Little by little, I came to understand that not having money wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was like growing taller, just a natural part of life. This realization opened up a new perspective for me. Next to our apartment was a single-family house where the landlord lived. The landlord, an older man named Mike, seemed to have a soft spot for kids. He was kind to me and even let me visit his house. Despite owning the apartment, Mike lived modestly and spent his days in a practical, no-frills way. I think his lifestyle was typical of a retired man on a pension. Back then, for me, sitting on the carpet in his house and watching TV was a completely new experience. Mike lived alone, so I could visit any time without feeling like I was bothering anyone. I often went to see him, drawn to his kind personality and easygoing demeanor, and he always welcomed me without ever showing any sign of annoyance. Mike taught me little by little what the world outside was really like. "Jessica, want to come over to my place today?" "Yeah, I'll come. I want to watch a drama." "You're starting to like the same things I do." Watching TV with Mike was so much fun. I think it was the first time I truly enjoyed spending time with someone. And to top it off, Mike often gave me snacks when I visited. They weren't like the fancy treats I used to have, but they had a comforting homemade charm that I grew to love. Mike seemed to love fruit and often bought seasonal fruits from a nearby fruit store. Through him, I became more attuned to the changing seasons and started to pay attention to the world around me. When I think about what might have happened to me if Mike hadn't been there, it's terrifying. Looking back, I realized that before we moved, I was the very definition of a spoiled child. When we first moved into the old apartment, I hated it so much that I even demanded Mike help us find a different place. The fancy dress-up doll I brought from our previous house felt completely out of place in my new life, and I resented it. One day, overwhelmed by frustration, I threw the doll at Mike. But instead of getting angry, he simply picked it up. He brushed it off gently and handed it back to me. "Listen, Jessica. Right now, you might not like this old apartment, but what truly matters is what's inside. No matter where you live, your worth doesn't change one bit. You have something wonderful inside you, something that shines brightly. Take care of it and help it grow." At the time, I didn't fully understand what Mike meant, but he repeated those words to me many times over the years. Eventually, his message sank in, almost like I memorized it, and it became a part of me. Now, I am deeply grateful to Mike. If we hadn't moved next door to him when I was 10, I would have grown up to be an insufferable entitled person. Learning about struggles and the value of hard work allowed me to grow far beyond what I had imagined. The time I spent with Mike has become an irreplaceable treasure to me. Mike himself was the one who shone brightly, guiding me through life like a beacon. For my mother, who had just started a job she wasn't used to, it must have been a relief to know that Mike was there to watch over me and provide emotional support. He was truly a benefactor to our little family. Being forced out of our old house was a shocking experience, but I came to believe that every hardship leads to something good. I was able to trust that wholeheartedly. I decided to pursue a career in banking and applied for scholarships to attend college. Of course, this wasn't an easy decision for our family. I considered graduating high school and working right away, but my desire to learn was too strong to ignore. As soon as I entered college, I knew I had made the right choice. The university was full of discovery, and I became completely absorbed in learning. I attended lectures more eagerly than anyone else and soaked up knowledge like a sponge. Even as a college student, I continued writing my reports at Mike's table. For me, his house felt far more comforting than my own room. "Jessica, glad you came by. I've got some cake someone gave me today. Want to share it?" Mike, now with a few more wrinkles than when we first met, would welcome me with a warm smile. I thought about how once I started earning money at the bank, I would buy Mike a truly special cake, one topped with plenty of fruit. The heater in his room warmed the air, and the kettle on top made a soft whistling sound. Mike always said he didn't need anything more luxurious than this. I often wondered how he would react if I surprised him with something a little fancier. With those thoughts in mind, I threw myself into my studies. But amidst our peaceful lives, something unbelievable happened. Mike suddenly passed away from an unexpected illness. When I heard the news from one of his relatives, I was completely stunned. It felt like the world had turned black and white, as if time itself had stopped moving. The everyday life I thought would last forever ended so abruptly. Mick was no longer in this world. As I began to lose consciousness from the shock, the sound of my mother's sobs beside me pulled me back to reality. After that, the two of us cried until we had no tears left. It seemed we were alone again, just the two of us. It wasn't just sadness, it was an overwhelming sense of loss. The small dream of treating Mick to a fruitcake was now something that could never come true. The comforting place I had known since I was 10 years old was now gone. From that point on, I stopped visiting the house next door and focused on studying alone in our cramped apartment. There was no Mick anymore to tease me when I was stuck on a problem. Whenever I turned on the TV, I'd find reruns of the drama Mick used to love. I couldn't help but feel how strange it was to continue my daily life without him. 2 years passed since those difficult days, and I secured a job offer at a major bank. I wished so badly that I could share the news with Mick. My mother, sensing my feelings, celebrated for both of us with exaggerated enthusiasm. "You did so well. I'm happier now than I've ever been in my life. You've become so accomplished. Mick must be watching over you from up above." "Yes, I think so too. Don't worry, Mom. From now on, I'll make sure you can live comfortably." After making that promise, I devoted myself to my work for the next 20 years. Even for someone like me though, there were people I didn't get along with. Or rather, there was someone who seemed to view me as an enemy. His name was Steve. He was a little younger than me, likely still in his 30s. Steve joined the bank with great fanfare as he was the president's son. For someone who should have had no rivals, Steve apparently found me irritating. The reason? I had earned the trust of the vice president. 10 years ago, I had won an in-house award for excellence in customer service. Now, I was in a position to train junior employees in the same field. While it was a bit embarrassing to me, the vice president had called me a role model for other employees. The vice president valued my skills highly. "Jessica, your customer service gives people a sense of reassurance. It's not uncommon for customers to come to us with anxiety. I'd like you to continue doing work that eases those worries." "Thank you for your kind words. I'll do my best." Earning the trust of senior executives was something I deeply appreciated, but it came with a downside. Steve became even harsher toward me. He openly referred to me as a thorn in his side. Surrounded by a group of followers who benefited from his influence, Steve lived in an environment where he could say whatever he wanted. As soon as Ted left the room, Steve would start his snide remarks. "Sucking up again. That's about all you're good for, old lady. A nothing like you should stay out of my way." "I'm not trying to get in your way. Please, Steve, just focus on your own work." No matter how much I tried to ignore him, he would always find a way to provoke me. He picked apart everything I did, pointing out even the smallest mistakes. I couldn't help but think how much better off he'd be if he directed that obsessive energy toward his own work. "Hey, old lady, I hear you're from a single mother household." Steve had finally heard about my family situation, probably from someone else. It wasn't surprising. I've never hidden the fact that I grew up in a single mother household. I don't feel embarrassed about it. In fact, I take pride in having worked hard despite that background. Yes, that's true. I've lived with my mother since I was 10. Seriously, how sad. I can't even imagine what it's like to grow up in a household without both parents. Guess you just had to tough it out and sneak your way into our bank, right? For Steve, the idea of a single mother household immediately equated to being poor. Sure, living with just my mother wasn't easy, but I didn't think anyone had the right to make assumptions about it. However, Steve wasn't the type to listen to reason. "You poor old lady. I guess we'll have to lower the standards of your job too. It's time for the meeting. Let's head out." We had to go to another branch for a work-related matter, and Steve and I were assigned to handle it together. Steve would always use his influence to take a taxi for the trip. A taxi arrived in front of us, and Steve got in. As I was about to follow, the door slammed shut. Through the door, I could hear Steve's loud voice. "People like you should just walk. See you." The taxi drove off. For a moment, I was stunned. But then I realized that it might actually be better than riding with Steve. I began walking toward the station. What surprised me was that when I arrived at our destination, I thought Steve would have already been there, but he was nowhere to be found. After waiting with the client, he showed up 30 minutes late. "Sorry, I got stuck in traffic. Thanks for waiting." "You were late. You got here after me." At this point, one of the employees from the other branch asked why the two of us had arrived separately. Steve had used some strange privileges to take a taxi. He knew the roads would be crowded, but still left at the last minute. Embarrassed, Steve turned bright red and looked down. He was clearly upset and didn't say a word during the rest of the meeting. There was also the time when I brought a coffee from a cafe to work. Steve scowled and came up to me, criticizing me. "Why are you buying such a luxury item? That place costs nearly $10, doesn't it? Trying to act all trendy with that fancy coffee. It doesn't suit you, old lady." I ignored him and sat down at my desk. Perhaps my indifference bothered him because he came closer and knocked my coffee cup over. The coffee spilled everywhere, even soaking into the desk next to mine. I quickly grabbed a cloth and wiped it off. Thankfully, the desk was well organized, and the paper seemed to be fine. The real trouble was the computer. Just as I finished cleaning up the spill, the person at the desk next to me arrived, only to find their computer wouldn't turn on. Apparently, coffee had seeped in and ruined it. I reported Steve's actions to our manager exactly as they happened. I thought he might face disciplinary action, but it seems he only received a verbal warning. The influence of his father, the bank president, was undeniable. The employee at the neighboring desk was forced to endure the inconvenience of not having a functioning computer until a new one could be provided, which was unfortunate. By now, Steve's behavior had escalated beyond something I could handle on my own. It had become a workplace-wide issue. Around this time, a new problem arose. Our branch's customer satisfaction ratings were revealed to be lower than other branches, and an emergency meeting was called. The attendees included the bank president, Steve, 4 of Steve's close associates, and me. As someone known for strong customer service skills, I was invited to the meeting. Originally, Ted, the vice president, was also supposed to attend, but he was called away at the last minute. Beforehand, Ted had explained that he wanted me in the meeting to share solutions as a customer service specialist. I told him I wasn't sure if I could contribute much, but he assured me that my everyday approach to work was worth learning from. However, when the meeting started, the exact opposite happened. No one paid attention to anything I said. It seemed Steve and his group had decided in advance to ignore me completely. Even the president, who didn't get along with Ted, smirked without intervening. The toxic atmosphere in the room made me furious. How could we even begin to identify ways to improve customer service when no one was willing to have a productive discussion? Unable to tolerate it any longer, I raised my voice and insisted on addressing the state of our branch's customer service. For the first time, Steve looked at me and then said something unbelievable. "Fatherless lady, you don't belong in meetings. What does my family background matter? Didn't you hear me? Is your hearing going, old lady? In our industry, trust is everything. Can anyone really trust someone from a single-mother household?" What an outrageous argument. Recently, I had been making extra effort to avoid mistakes, knowing Steve was always watching for any opportunity to criticize me. While his snide remarks had subsided, his frustration had clearly built up instead. Now he had crossed the line by attacking something beyond my control, my family background, to stoop so low just to insult someone. Steve's pettiness made me feel almost sorry for him. "So are you saying my input isn't being considered?" "Of course not. Who cares what an old lady like you thinks will handle the issues? You can quietly pack up and leave." "I see. Well, I'll be going then." I left the room with as much confidence as I could muster, but tears welled up once I was alone. At this age, I never thought someone would bring up my single mother background as an insult. If Mike were here, I wondered what he would have said. "Don't worry about it. What matters is what's inside," he would have reassured me. Even now, the 10-year-old girl within me longed for his encouragement. Despite my best efforts to outperform everyone and prove myself, I found myself discouraged by an insurmountable reality. I informed my colleagues that I was leaving early and headed home while the sun was still high. Now I live in a spacious apartment, having moved out of Mike's old place. My early return surprised my mother. "Why are you home at this hour?" Holding back tears, I took my mother's hands and told her everything that had happened. As I spoke, the anger I had been suppressing began to rise. All the hardships we had endured together, supporting each other through every challenge for Steve, who knew nothing about us, to dismiss us with a single comment about being from a single-mother household. An indescribable wave of emotion washed over me. My mother must have felt it too, as her expression grew increasingly stern. By the time I finished, her face was red with anger. Without hesitation, my mother picked up the phone and called my bank branch. "Hello, this is Emma Wilson. I'd like to withdraw my $1 billion account." I couldn't comprehend what she was saying. Her conversation turned into an argument with no progress being made. When she finally hung up, I asked, "What's this about? $1 billion? Where did that kind of money come from? I was planning to keep it a secret from you." She hesitated before continuing. "Actually, 23 years ago, after Mike passed away, he left me a significant inheritance. It was a formal bequest specified in his will. His relatives insisted I accept it, but I felt it was too precious to use frivolously, so I decided to invest it. I never imagined my mother had a talent for investing." She explained that she wanted to save it for an emergency. Over the years, she had grown Mike's inheritance into an enormous amount. Although it would have been smarter to diversify the deposits across various banks, she chose to keep it all in my branch because of our connection. This was her way of showing trust in my bank. Steve's actions had betrayed that trust. My mother had always taken pride in the fact that I worked for the bank, but knowing that it was a place where petty harassment occurred was a different matter entirely. As we were discussing this, the doorbell rang. When I answered, I found the bank president, Steve, and Ted standing there. I invited them in, and they all looked surprised. Emma's daughter is Jessica, apparently so. Even I didn't know my mother had such assets. So what brings you here? Of course, it's about the withdrawal. To be honest, if you pull out $10 billion, our branch will face serious trouble, Steve said. As usual, he spoke in a calm tone, but there was a subtle edge of panic in his voice. My mother, however, remained composed. The reason is simple. My daughter was told at today's meeting that people from single-mother households are unnecessary. Ted's eyes widened in shock. What? That happened? I'm so sorry. I wasn't present at the meeting. Steve, is this true? Steve reluctantly nodded. What's the meaning of this? Do you think that kind of behavior is acceptable for a professional? It's utterly disgraceful and completely unacceptable. Steve had no excuse. Well, it was just a joke. There are things you can joke about and things you absolutely cannot. Even if it was a joke, your comments are inexcusable. I can no longer trust you in any capacity. Ted quickly apologized to me. He then prompted Steve and the bank president to apologize to my mother and me. Even Steve, who had been so arrogant, couldn't avoid apologizing when $10 billion in deposits was at stake. However, my mother stood firm on her decision and proceeded with withdrawing her funds, forcing the men to leave. The next day at work, I was informed that another meeting would be held, and this time, Ted would attend. I was also instructed to participate. At the meeting, Ted presented several emails, all complaints directed at Steve. It turned out Steve had been receiving complaints by name for some time. Sir, take a look. Your son's performance is far from commendable. To be frank, the quickest way to improve this branch's customer satisfaction is to reassign Steve. What do you think? Tension filled the room. Until now, whenever Steve did something wrong, the bank president and his allies had always shielded him. But with $10 billion withdrawn, someone had to take responsibility. As a result, Steve was reassigned to a meaningless idle position. Since then, I've heard nothing about Steve's reputation. It seems he's living a quiet, unremarkable life completely out of the spotlight. But for someone as prideful as Steve, that must be the most unbearable thing of all. Additionally, this spring, the bank president will be replaced, and Ted is set to take over. The staff quietly welcomed the change, relieved that a sensible person would be in charge. My mother took this opportunity to distribute her assets among various banks. She had been considering it for a while. This reduces the risk, and in the end, it turned out for the best, she said with a contented smile. With Steve gone, I can now work without stress. The branch's performance has improved, and I've been offered a promotion to branch manager. Of course, I accepted without hesitation. While I'm nervous about the new responsibilities, I'm more excited to see how far I can go. This spring will be a busy time for me. Today marks Mike's Memorial Day. My mother and I visited the grave and offered flowers. We also placed some of Mike's favorite fruits alongside them. Do you remember? Mike always looked out for us. Whenever he went somewhere, he'd bring us souvenirs. It's rare to find a landlord like that. Indeed. Since moving out of Mike's apartment, I've never experienced such a close-knit relationship anywhere else. Looking back, I can truly say we were fortunate to have met Mike when we were at our lowest point. Mike always said Jessica would grow into an amazing person. And look, he was right. I still have a long way to go. Someday, I want to be able to help others just like Mike did. Oh, you're already a daughter I'm proud of. Hearing such unexpected words surprised me. I glanced at my mother and saw her looking at the gravestone with tears in her eyes. Perhaps in front of Mike, she could express her true feelings. Mike helped us even during our hardest times to hold on to our dignity. It's because of that experience that I can confidently say we are who we are today. Though it's sad we had to part ways during our journey, I will always cherish what he gave us and carry it forward. As I stood there lost in thought, someone approached the grave. It was an older man. When I looked closer, I was stunned. It was Ted. Ted, what brings you here? Jessica, what about you? I explained my connection to Mike. Ted nodded deeply. I see. I have a similar story. When I was a student, I lived in Mike's apartment. Let's see. That must have been about 34 years ago. It turned out that Ted and my family had crossed paths, moving in and out of Mike's apartment back to back. The coincidence thrilled us. We excitedly shared memories of the exact same apartment, its unique quirks like scratches on the beams or the color of the lampshades. When I was a student, Mike took great care of me too. He often gave me seasonal fruits. It was the same for me. Mike was so kind to us. Ted glanced at the fruit we had placed on the grave. In his hands was a similar fruit basket. I've been so busy with work that I haven't been able to visit on his memorial days. But maybe because I'm getting older, this year, I felt I had to come. And now running into you here feels like Mike brought us together. I feel the same way. Meeting you here feels like a special connection. Please tell me more about your memories of Mike. Ted's gentle urging made it feel like we had been lifelong friends. Overcome with emotion, I lost track of time as we shared stories. Despite the cold, Ted truly seemed like someone who had inherited Mike's kindness. Talking to him felt natural, as if I could open up completely. My mother seemed to feel the same. It was as if we had gained another important person in our lives. Though it was still a chilly season, beneath the ground, the signs of spring were stirring. It was a day that reminded us of new beginnings and connections.